Hello everyone and welcome to Quality Old Games. Today we are making another tier list, this time from Germania's unit roster in Rome Total War. And the tier list is based rather heavily on my latest campaign playthrough, which was done as Germania. So also the in addition to the unit's fighting capabilities, also their requirements, upkeep, ease of getting and so on will be taken into account. So it's not purely fighting capabilities, but also about how easy it is to get them and how I found the units in the campaign. So without further ado, let's begin with Cavalry. First we have Barbarian Cavalry. Overall, I have to say I don't like Barbarian Cavalry much. Of course, it can work rather well in Hammer and Anvil tactics with Spear Warband, but still, I think its morale is too weak. And because of that, I think, well, it's not, despite the bad morale, the unit itself is not bad, especially in the early game. So I think it gets a place in the weaker side of decent category. But yeah, overall I don't like Barbarian Cavalry too much. Then we have Gothic Cavalry, which is pretty much on the other end of the roster, so compared rather in relation to other Germanian units, it's late game cavalry unit, and from the temple from which you get free experience for it. And as you may have seen in recent video, it beats Cappadocian Cavalry in 1 versus 1, which is, well, relatively impressive. So the unit is clearly one of the stronger heavy cavalry units in the entire game. Of course, it takes 2 turns to train. You need to build the temple chain, taking 6 turns, so that you can, for instance, replenish it. So that's a bit of a downside, but I think most definitely strong A tier, perhaps even weak Spartan tier. But let's put them, at least for now, to wannabe Spartans. Then we have Barbarian Noble Cavalry. If you can get Gothic Cavalry, use it. Of course, you can recruit these guys from stables, so that's a bonus, but because you get usually quite often relatively high tier stables from cities you capture, so it's easy to replenish, easy to train, or at least find the facilities to train these guys, so most definitely, in my opinion, better than Barbarian Cavalry. But I think the Gothic Cavalry just is so much better than the Noble Cavalry, so this earns place only in strong decent tier, or good decent tier. Then we have War Dogs. Gimmicky units, you can spam them for great efficiency. 2 turns to train, they don't tax the population of the rather small Germania cities too much, so that's clearly a bonus. In most of my campaigns I haven't used them too much, so I think they are decent, and of course if you are enjoying playing with War Dogs, I guess they could be put even in Spartan tier, or at the very least wannabe Spartan, but I will give them only decent. Mostly because, well, I don't use them, and as part of a large army consisting other units besides War Dogs, I don't think they are that good. And the main reason is that, of course, it's nice that the dogs are replenished as missiles for archers or other missile units, but when the War Dogs rout one unit, they tend to chase it to the edge of the map, and then you are left fighting without those War Dogs, because they are chasing the one unit. So in some cases that could be problematic for the outcome of the overall battle. So that's somewhat of a minus for me. Then we have Barbarian Warlord, early version. I think they are rather essential in the early game. So clearly wannabe Spartan tier. Decent enough unit, of course. A stray enemy War Dog can take it out surprisingly easily, or rather the general of the unit. I have too much experience of that. But yeah, solid enough unit. Unless, of course, you are engaging higher tier enemy units, then the Warlord's utility drops quite drastically. So in the early game, really good. In the late game, better to keep behind your infantry lines and chase down fleeing enemies. Let's put it that way. But because it's so useful in the early game, I think it deserves a place in wannabe Spartan tier. Then we have Chosen Barbarian Warlord, late game general unit. And this might become as a bit of surprise, but I will give it only a decent tier. And, well, it is quite a bit better stats-wise than the kind of ordinary or early game Warlord. But since you get these guys only in the late game, and quite often the enemy has high tier units facing you, so the opposition compared to the bodyguard is so much tougher for these units that their utility rate drops in the campaign, at least in my opinion and in my experience. So it's quite different to charge the rear of militia hoplites with this unit than charge the rear of armored hoplites with this unit. I think the early general fares better against militia hoplites than this one fares against armored hoplites. And the same goes, for instance, against Hastati and then against Legionary Cohort. So the unit is better, but the situation where you get it is so much later that it decreases the utility. So that's about it from Cavalry. Let's move to Infantry. First we have Axemen, tier 2 unit, yeah. And you shouldn't make them, because you have so much better tier 1 unit. There are some situations where these normal Axemen might fare better than Spear Warband. For instance, defending walls, scaling walls. But in my opinion, that's pretty much it. So the unit is not bad per se, but it's just obsolete because of the Spear Warband being so good tier 1 unit. So I don't see any reason why you would want to make regular Axemen. Then we have Berserkers. It's kind of gimmicky unit. In some situations, it's just the most overpowered unit in the entire game, and in other instances, well, it's just target practice for instance, archers. So it's kind of a situational unit, and of course its utility is lowered by the fact that when it starts to berserk, you cannot control it anymore, so it just goes off and tries to do whatever it can. It's really good against sword infantry, regular spear infantry, and I think also against cavalry at least decent. But it's very vulnerable to missiles, especially archers, and it's rather vulnerable to phalanx units, and this lowers the utility of the unit. And it takes a while until you get these guys, because Germania's starting settlements are so small, so practically you need to capture some Roman settlement or Alesia or London or Londinium or some Greek settlement, for instance, or Thracian settlement, to be able to train these guys quickly. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's situational unit, and because of that I think it only deserves a place in decent category. Versus infantry, regular infantry, it would be Spartan, but versus archers it would be don't make. So really situational unit. I don't have it in my armies of them because of the situational aspect, because you may have keeping it in reserve, doing nothing, if the enemy army composition kind of counters it. So at least in my experience and in my opinion, it's better to have perhaps in some situation a weaker unit that can be utilized in every battle compared to kind of niche unit. So that's the reason for only placing decent here. Then we have another heavy-hitting infantry chosen X-Men. I think they deserve a place in A tier, clearly, because these are kind of the tin can openers you need to when facing elite phalanx units, when you are facing elite Roman units or any other elite units. They hit hard, but of course you need to use them as flanking force because they are really vulnerable from the front, especially to missiles. So kind of similar to Berserkers, but you can always control these units, which is kind of important when you are using them as a flanking force or rear attacking force. The ability to micro is essential there. And these guys really do pack a punch. So when they can hit the enemy properly, they will hit them really hard. Then we have Naked Fanatics, another Temple unit, or trained from Temple. I don't really like the morale of these units. I have tested them somewhat and not really impressive. So I guess since they are a Temple unit, and if you build a temple, you may in some instances train these if you don't have barracks for Spear Warband, but I mean, perhaps it's don't make. But a bit higher than X-Men, because X-Men comes from barracks, from which comes the Spear Warband as well. So yeah, don't make. Then we have Night Raiders, a rather nice unit from Public Order building, from Taverns. I guess it requires tier 3. Downside is 2 turns training time. Nice thing is that they frighten enemy units and they are a bit faster than normal infantry. So that's rather nice. I think they are at least decent unit. Of course, in the later game, they will run into troubles if the enemy doesn't break. So, yeah. And they are relatively lightly armored, so if the enemy stays and fights, they will take some casualties. So, yeah. I think decent unit, but at least in my campaign playthrough, I didn't utilize them that much. Then we have Peasants. I think the utility of these units depends on how long it takes to finish, for instance, the long campaign. I did my playthrough rather quickly, and because of that I didn't need Peasants too much to improve public order. But Germania's trouble or problem with longer playthroughs is that their maximum tier is tier 3. And when there are large cities which are growing, you cannot mitigate the culture penalty. You cannot improve the main building or governor's building past tier 3, which will cause public order issues. So you will need to utilize Peasants quite a bit in order to maintain the public order. So in my campaign, I would say these were decent or bad, and of course they are just trash in battles, but they are meant to keep public order and perhaps transfer population. But in longer campaigns, I would think that these guys are rather essential for going through it, because you need them to maintain public order. So I think I will give them the Spartan tier. It's rather in line how I usually rate Peasant units in the campaign setting. Then we have Screeching Women, another Temple unit. They hit relatively hard, they are really unprotected, and their formation is not good, and of course they have that screeching ability, but well, it brings some benefits for the army, but it brings at least some harm to my ears as well. I don't like to use the special ability, so yeah, I think they are bad. I don't like to use them. Perhaps you like, but I don't. And then we have Spear Warband. I guess you have already guessed. It goes to top Spartan tier. I mean, tier 1 unit. You can wipe the Gauls out with this unit. You can wipe the Britons out with this unit. You can wipe the Dacians out of this unit. With this unit, you can wipe Spain out with this unit. And you can go rather far against Romans with this unit as well. So, yeah, they are just one of the best, if not the best. Well, perhaps Horse Archers are a good contender for the place of best tier 1 unit, but these guys clearly are among the best units in the overall game, and especially regarding tier 1. So clearly Spartan tier. Then we have only missile units left, and Germania's roster doesn't have too many of those. Let's begin with Skirmisher Warband. I don't really like the unit too much. Too few missiles, too short range. I mean, why to take one of these guys when you can take one of Spear Warbands? Or one of, perhaps in some cases, even Cavalry units. So, yeah, I don't see too much use of these units. I think I have rather consistently rated these Javelin using missile units rather low because, well, the number of missiles and short range. Then, on the other hand, the other Germanian missile unit, Chosen Archer Warband, I think it's, well, because of my playstyle relying heavily on infantry, I will put in Spartan tier. Of course, if you guys rely more heavily on cavalry, I guess these guys lose some points and would go to wannabe Spartan tier in that case, and perhaps Gothic cavalry here to Spartan tier. But overall, I mean, long range missiles, one turn to train, well armored, packs a punch. So really solid addition to Germania's roster. Practically, since they don't have that many missile units, that's the one unit you need to get if you want to get missile units. And it's quite powerful combo to put kind of Spear Warband in front of these guys to slow down the enemies, and actually with some experience they can deal some really decent damage as well. And those Chosen Archer Warbands are rather free to reign most of the battlefield. So yeah, really solid unit, and also when they run out of ammo or arrows, they can do relatively decently in melee as well, especially if you can use them as a flanking force or something like that, so they are not completely useless when out of ammo. So this is my view of Germania's unit roster in the campaign setting. So what do you think? Do you disagree or agree? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And thank you very much for watching. If you like the content, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Have a great rest of the day. Quality old games.